It was a Wednesday evening when I first got a hint that my world, my safe and sane world, wasn't quite what I thought it was. I had gotten home from work a bit early. I heard my wife, Marge, moving around in our bedroom upstairs and thought that I would go up and say hello. As I walked down the hallway, I could hear her talking to someone on the phone. As I got closer, I could hear her end of the conversation. "Yes, sweetie, today was great. I really enjoyed it." Huh, since when does she enjoy work? Our bedroom door was slightly open, so I peeked through. She was undressing while talking on her cell phone. She slithered out of her skirt and laid it on the bed. I noticed that she was wearing lacy black panties, and I knew that I never had seen them before this. I was about to walk in, but then she said, "I gotta go. He could be home soon, and I must get a shower first. Talk to you tomorrow, stud, bye." She put the phone on the charger and took off her blouse. She was wearing a matching black lace bra. Facing away from me, she peeled off those panties and tossed them in the hamper. The bra followed. As she moved around the bed to head to the shower, she passed a mirror. Being a woman, she, of course, had to stop and look. From my position at the corner of the door, I could see her reflection in the mirror perfectly. What I saw made a sick chill go down my body. I felt like I might piss myself, shit myself, throw up, or all three. There in the mirror, her left breast clearly had a suck mark on it. My wife had a hickey on her breast, and I didn't give it to her. I heard her gasp and realized that she saw what I had just seen. She pulled up her tit with one hand while rubbing the suck mark with a finger of the other hand. "Ah shit," she snarled. "Now I've got a mark that I've gotta hide. Holy shit." She went into the bathroom and started her shower while I stood outside our bedroom crying and shaking. My name is David Atkinson. Marge has been my wife for 23 years. We have 2 children, Julia, who is 19, and Tom, who is 18. Marge works part-time in procurement at the local Air Nation Guard base. I am a chemical engineer. Until a few minutes ago, I thought that we had a great marriage and a great life. Now it looked like my wife needed someone else to make her life great. After a bit, I regained some control and, entering our bedroom, I picked up her cell phone to find the number of that last call. I got another surprise. She had a password on her cell phone. We had never used passwords and sometimes had made calls on each other's phones. I realized that I had not used her phone in a couple of months. It just never was convenient. I picked up her blouse and smelled it. There was a faint trace of aftershave that I did not recognize on it. Going to the hamper, I picked out her panties and bra. The panties were used, as might be expected, but I didn't find any big gooey blobs of semen. Thinking a bit, I got the digital video recorder from the kitchen and a Ziploc bag. Going back to the bedroom, I put the underwear in the Ziploc bag and stuffed it in my pocket. I made a note to myself to order a semen detection kit and have it shipped to the office. The video recorder went on my dresser, facing the mirror. I set it to record and wrapped one of my ties around it. It was mostly hidden. As I went back downstairs, I saw that her laptop was on, so I figured that this would be a good time to check her email. No such luck. She had put a password on it. We had never used computer passwords either, which was another piece of evidence. Then I left. I really wanted to confront her, but I was an emotional wreck. Plus, I had no real evidence. She could just deny everything. No, I needed hardcore proof, and I wanted to know whom she was screwing so that I could hurt him in return. I called my wife's cell phone, knowing that she was still in the shower, and told her that I was stuck on a job and would grab a late dinner when I was finished. Hiding her underwear in the garage, I headed to the closest bar to think and suffer. It was a quiet, rundown bar that bordered on a shabby motel. It offered nothing special: average food, cheap drinks, and privacy. Entering the bar, I noticed that there was a new barmaid. Great, I thought. I hope she knows how to make a gin and tonic. It turned out that she did. Her name was Mary. She had just started, and I enjoyed talking with her. She was a divorced mom, trying to scrape by in life. I got back home at about 11 p.m. The house was quiet with everyone in bed. I went up to the bedroom to undress. As I was slipping into my robe, Marge said, "You're late tonight, hon?" Turning to her, I replied, "I'm sorry to wake you. It was a long day." Then I added, "But I'll make it up to you if you feel neglected." She sighed and said, "Oh, I'm just too tired right now. How about in the next day or two?" "It's a date, babe. I'm going to relax for a few minutes and then join you." "Good night," I answered. "Night." Grabbing the recorder, I left the bedroom and went downstairs to my computer. As I plugged the camera into my laptop, I realized that our lovemaking in the last few months had dwindled down from 2 or 3 times a week to once a week, and that for the last month or so, once a week was Saturday night. I fast-forwarded the recording until the bathroom door opened. She immediately went to the mirror and examined her breast. I could see the suck mark clearly. She got out flannel pajamas for later. She normally sleeps nude. I saved the video and cleared the camera. After putting it away, I went to bed. On my way, I pushed the thermostat up about 4 degrees. Let's see how she likes flannels. Marge was either sleeping or pretending to be asleep when I got into bed. Thursday morning, I got up early to get away from her. I didn't think I could hide my anger, and I needed time to get under control and make more plans. Calling the office, I let them know that I wouldn't be in until the afternoon. Then I called my friend, George. I knew George would be able to help. Not only have we been good friends for years, but he caught his wife cheating on him about a couple of years ago and went through a nasty divorce. We spent many hours together drowning his sorrows. George is now a major in the Air Nation Guard. Since his divorce, he had thrown himself into his work and had received several promotions. The last had put him in charge of security for the base. On the second ring, he picked up the phone and said, "Hey buddy, how's it going?" "Not too well right now," I replied. "I need your help. I think that Marge is cheating on me." "Ah shit, David. I am so sorry," he said. "I'll do anything I can to help. Can you come over here this morning?" "Yeah," I replied. "How about if I go over now?" "Sounds good," George quietly said. "I hope you are wrong, but I've never known you to overreact." "I don't think I am, but with your help, I should be able to prove it one way or the other." Once there, we sat on the sofa and went over what I knew. When I left an hour later, I had part of a plan and had borrowed 5 digital audio recorders from George, the same ones that he used to catch his wife. I drove back home. Marge's car was gone. I placed 4 recorders in the house, saving the last one for her car. Then I noticed that the house was a little cooler than usual. Checking the thermostat, I saw that she had pushed it back down. I assumed that she had had a hot night. Deciding to look around a bit, I went through her closet carefully. The first thing that I noticed was she had a couple of outfits that I had not seen her wear. They were more daring than her usual. Maybe she bought them but then didn't feel comfortable actually wearing them in public, I thought. Then, in the back of a dresser drawer, I found some lingerie that I had never seen before. They showed signs of wear. A couple of them were torn. Torn as in somebody ripped them off of Marge to get to her naked body. That hurt, and I just stared at them for many minutes. Finally, I headed off to work. Around 3, I called Marge's cell and left a voicemail that I was stuck on a job and wouldn't be home until late. As soon as I got home that evening, I put the final voice recorder in Marge's car and then went to bed. I made sure to go to bed well after Marge did Friday night as well. She was either sleeping or pretending to be. I did check the audio recorders Friday evening, but heard nothing of interest. I quietly got the kids their breakfast, as is our custom on weekends. Saturday, Marge gets to sleep late. Sunday I do. After they finished and went to watch TV, I cleaned up the kitchen and put Marge's breakfast in the microwave. I connected a LAN cable to my laptop, logged into my computer, into the wireless router, and disabled wireless access. Then I left Marge a note directing her to the microwave and telling her that I was outside, then went out to start yard chores. About 2 hours later, Marge came outside complaining that her laptop couldn't connect to the internet. We walked in. I tried my laptop and said, "Mine's connected. Let's look at yours." She seemed a bit nervous and hovered around her laptop and me. I pretended to troubleshoot and she eventually got bored and wandered away, but about every 5 minutes she was back again. While she was gone, I slipped in a memory stick and installed a keylogger program. The next time that she left, I configured it to capture all key presses, to take a snapshot of the screen twice a minute, to track all websites that she visited, and to capture her email including deleted and sent items. The next time that she left, I walked back to my laptop and restarted the wireless service. I checked that her laptop was now connecting and went to find her. After showing her that it was connecting to the internet, I told her that the hard drive was badly fragmented. I brought up the cleanup program and suggested that when she was done for the day, she click this button and let the program run overnight. That would also give my keylogger time to transfer all the data to me. She slipped her hands around my neck, kissed me, and, smiling seductively, said, "Thanks, big guy. How can I pay for your services?" I smiled back, slapped her but lightly, and said, "How about washing my car?" Her face showed that she was expecting a very different answer. I kissed her cheek and said, "Just kidding." Pulling away, I added, "I gotta get back to work out there." She looked confused as I walked out of the room. While mowing the grass, I realized that I was being stupid. I wasn't going to have sex with her tonight, but I didn't want her to start thinking that I was suspicious before I had real evidence. I had to treat her normally for now. I decided to put some labor here today and be too tired and sore for sex tonight. We watched a couple of movies with the kids in the evening. Marge snuggled up next to me, and she felt good. She was feeling frisky. A couple times while they were engrossed in the movie, We took a break toward the end of the second movie. I used the opportunity to get a drink and to pop one of Marge's Xanax. I figured I would be asleep in 45 minutes. About 15 minutes later, Marge woke me up. I announced that I had worked too hard today and was going to bed. Marge looked disappointed, and even more so when the kids asked her to stay for a third movie. I do not know when she came to bed. I was oblivious. Sunday morning was my sleep-in morning, but I was up at 5 a.m. I didn't want to be in bed when Marge woke in case she wanted a morning ride, and it was time to start checking her data. I shut off her alarm clock as I was leaving. As I booted my computer, I realized that if I didn't have sex with her tonight, she absolutely would be suspicious. I started up the keylogger reader. While it initialized, I added a password to my computer. There were about 500 emails in the hidden folder, so I started reading them. The keylogger sends the oldest mails first, and I was looking at 6-month-old emails. I did see 2 emails from somebody named Will Perez. He had his own domain name, but the messages were about her work. Maybe the guy works with her. Or maybe this is the guy. I sorted by name and found one about 4 months old with the subject, "Hey, hot stuff." I read it. It was not explicit, but it sounded like this guy was trying to seduce her. He had registered his name as an internet domain. A brief check showed that he did not have a web page. I resorted by date and found 6 from Old Willie dated yesterday. No wonder Marge was hovering around her laptop. She was worried that I might open Outlook. I opened the newest email and read while my life crashed around me. Starting at the bottom where she bitched at him for marking her and how hard it was to hide it from me. His reply was basically, "Shit happens. Get over it, and to hell with your husband." Her furious reply was sent 14 minutes later. One paragraph was interesting. She wrote, "I know you do not love your wife, but I do love my husband. I do not want to hurt him or my marriage. It is bad enough that I haven't let him have me much lately. Now since you marked me, I can't even let him see me naked. I will not be meeting you this Wednesday." Interesting, but it didn't change anything. The next 2 were from him with a changed tune. He begged her forgiveness, told her he would always be gentler in the future. He offered to take her on a trip somewhere warm if she could get away for a while. He professed his love for her. Oh, pew. He sounded like a teenager. The last was from her, saying that she was glad that he now understood her position. She would only take trips with her husband, and she would not meet him this Wednesday. She added that she expected that it would take a week for the marks to fade, and that then she was going to be busy making it up to her husband. Other emails provided more information. They had been screwing for about 2 months now. They met at a local motel where his company kept a room rented, allegedly for his long-distance sales guys to crash there when needed. One email gave her directions to the place, saying that the company has had room 187 for 2 years now. It was the motel across from the bar that I was in the other day. Then a new email arrived from him. It was a reply to one that she had sent last night, and I was sent spinning again. She had emailed him that she couldn't do without him screwing her this week, and that she would meet him Wednesday at 1 p.m. She insisted that he be gentle this time. His reply was effusive crap about how wonderful she was, and how he would make it wonderful for her. I decided right then that they were both going to pay for their actions. I needed to make some plans, and would need George's help. I forwarded the most useful emails to George and started making breakfast. Marge came down around 9:30 and thanked me for letting her sleep in that morning. I said that it was only fair since I crashed out so early last night. She hugged me and whispered, "Don't work too hard today, sweetie. I need you to do your hard work tonight." I ignored the second part and said, "I'm mostly done out there, just a couple more hours left to do." I pulled away, saying, "I'd better get to work." As I was leaving, I glanced back and saw a worried look on her face. She quickly changed it when she saw me looking. I said, "Yell if you need anything, babe." She gave a weak, "Okay." I was cleaning the garage when George called. First he asked if I could talk now. I went outside and told him yes. He said, "I read the emails. I am so sorry." "Thanks," I said. "I feel like shit, but at least I know now." "You know, and you have some evidence, but you do not have proof court yet," he noted. I replied, "I know. Maybe I can get some pictures of her going in or out of the motel. We can do a lot better than that, if you want. You just won't be able to use the evidence in court," he said. "Talk to me. I have conducted a few criminal investigations at that motel over the years. The owner is a good guy who doesn't want criminals or druggies hanging around. I can call him tomorrow and get him to print me a key to that room as part of my ongoing investigation," was his reply. "We will have to find out when Perez won't be there, and then we can install the same hidden cameras I used to catch my bitch of an ex," he explained. I said firmly, "Yes, I want to do that. Not only to catch her, but because I want to get him. Can you see what you can find on him also?" "First thing Monday morning, I'll get that ball rolling." Let's see if we can do the install Monday or Tuesday. We'll need maybe an hour, he answered. We talked a few more minutes. George explained that the equipment was sound and motion activated, and that it would transmit to a receiver that had to be within 100 feet. He expected to put the receiver in a utility room somewhere. When I wanted to retrieve the data, I just had to drive to the motel and activate the receiver in my car. The first receiver was also a transmitter. On my signal, it would dump its data to me and then clear its memory. It might take up to 2 hours to send a full day worth of video. The rest of Sunday was uneventful. My first thought was to do a rough, quick sex and to be asleep 10 minutes later. Then I changed my mind and decided to try and stay away from her. That night, as soon as she came in the bedroom, I pretended to be asleep already. She checked once and rolled over to her side and slept. I awoke early Monday morning and left the house before anyone else was up. Calling my office Monday morning, I let them know that I would not be in today and then headed over to George's place. He told me that he had called the motel manager and had gotten some information. It turns out that our lover boy is getting it on with at least 3 women at his little love nest. I'm sure that he thinks he is smart having a full-time room to use, but he's dumb for using the same room. George also said that the manager thought that Perez was a creep who harassed the staff. The final piece of information was that Perez worked in the room a couple of afternoons a week, but was rarely there before 11 a.m. Well, let's grab our stuff and get going, George said. We loaded the equipment into George's van and pulled up at the motel in 10 minutes. George knocked on the manager's door and introduced me as someone who was working with him on an investigation and noted that I would be around sometimes. The manager, whose name was Kevin, said that that would be fine and that he did not want any illegal activities happening in the motel. He handed George the room key and showed us where the room was located on a room map. We saw that there was a utility room about 50 feet away. George asked for a key to it, which Kevin immediately printed out for him. Last, Kevin called Perez's room to make sure that he wasn't there. He did not get an answer. We thanked Kevin and drove the van over near the room. George knocked on the door a couple of times and then let us in with the key. It was deserted. I stopped, suddenly staring at the bed where my wife had spread her legs for another man. After a while, I turned and started helping. In less than 2 hours, the equipment was installed and tested. As we were leaving, I noticed a laptop docking station on the table. "Look, George, he must use his laptop in here." I practically shouted. "If I can get in here while it is here and he is not, I can install the key logger on it." George said, "Maybe he leaves it here when he goes to lunch or dinner." "I'll wait outside every day if I need to," I responded. "First, I want to get a GPS on his car so that we don't get surprised." "Don't jump the gun," he answered. "Understand. I don't want to risk screwing up payback. Let's get out of here. I'll buy lunch. How about across the parking lot? Their food is pretty good. Oh, and they have a new barmaid. She is pretty and easy to talk to." "Sounds good. I'm hungry," George noted. The bar was deserted when we walked inside of it. I entered first. Mary saw me, smiled and waved. Then George stepped in behind me. Mary's face changed to one of shock. She dropped the towel that she was using to clean the bar and immediately walked over to us. Ignoring me, she grabbed George in a full body hug, saying, "George, it is so good to see you again." He hugged her back warmly and said, "Mary, I have wondered. Looks like you are back on your feet. I am so glad." She pulled back, still holding him, and said, "No, I'm not there yet, but I am getting closer. Thanks to you." From the sidelines, I said, Mary, I'd like you to meet my good friend, George." They both laughed. Mary released George and put both of her hands on my hand, saying, "I've liked you from when we first met. Now that I know that you are George's friend, well, that matters a lot." I smiled and said, "He's a butthole in general, but he's okay." She grinned and said, "George and I go back a couple of years, but I've never thought of him as a butthole. Must be a guy thing." Mary kept taking care of drink orders for the 4 other patrons, but always came back to talk to us when done. Among other things, I learned that she was working as much as possible to save money to be able to enter nursing school in about 5 months. Around 2 in the afternoon, George and I were the only customers left. I commented on that, and Mary said that it was always deserted in the afternoons. She added, "I don't make any tip money, which sucks, but I usually use the time to study." Then grinning at us, she concluded, "But it's a lot nicer talking with you guys." The 3 of us chatted about another half hour when suddenly Mary, looking rather solemn, turned to George and said, "George, I am going to tell him." George just returned her gaze and made a slow nod. She turned to me and said, "If we are going to be friends, I don't want any secrets. And maybe, when I tell you, you might not want to think of me as my friend. I'll understand. But but I won't hide my life from you. And I don't want you to find out from someone else." I saw her reach for George's hand. She clasped it hard and said, "Let me tell you how I met George. He arrested me. He took me to a filthy holding cell in some cold dungeon he has on that base. I broke down when I saw the cell. It didn't matter to him. He just pushed me in and began closing the door. Then he stopped and watched me cry. He started yelling at me, telling me how I was ruining my life and how stupid I was being. Suddenly, I realized he wasn't yelling that I was a useless crack bitch, which is what I was. He was telling me that I was hurting myself. Nobody ever said that to me before, but I heard him then, and I lost it. I collapsed on that horrible dirty mattress and bawled like a kid. George sat down next to me and uttered one word. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "He asked me, why?" Nothing more. Looking at George, she continued, "For the first and only time in my life, I spilled my guts, crying, hysterical at times. I told him everything. I don't know how long it took. It must have been hours that George sat there with me. When I was finally done, he just stared at me for the longest time. Then he got up, softly squeezed my shoulder, and then locked me in that cell. He left me there for 14 hours. I didn't see anybody, didn't hear anything. I was cold and hungry the entire time, coming down off a crack high. Finally, he returned and told me that it was time to see the judge. Normally, you get a chance to clean up and put on a fresh jail suit before you appear in court. Not me. He made me go in there as I was. The defense attorney didn't say anything. The judge was about to sentence me to jail when suddenly George stood up and asked to address the court. I'll never, ever forget what he said, or what he looked like in his full dress uniform. I can quote him verbatim to this day, but what matters is that he told the judge that justice would not be served if he remanded me to jail. He wanted me in rehab. The judge and the attorney looked shocked, with reason. I was an addict, a hooker, and a 3-time loser who was obviously guilty of the crimes that George had charged me. And suddenly hard-nosed George was on my side? After some hesitation, the judge gave me a chance at a 90-day rehab with 4 years of hard time if I screwed up. I jumped on it. Looking back to George, she said, "I haven't touched crack since the day that George busted me." Stepping back and looking at both of us, she added softly, "George, David, I don't walk the streets now, but I am still a hooker. It is the only way that I can save money for school and provide for my daughter, but if you two don't want to talk to me anymore, I understand." "I am sorry, George." She found herself being hugged from both sides. George said, "As long as you keep fighting, I'm in your corner. And you will make it, I know you." I added, "Mary, I am glad we met, and happy to think of you as my friend." It was a good thing that the bar was deserted, and we were in a dark corner. Mary just held us and cried. Monday evening, Marge got in around 5:30 and had Chinese dinner in her hands. She came over to kiss me, but I just grabbed the bags and took them to the counter, while saying, "Great, we are all starved." When I turned around, she was looking at me with a pensive expression. I said, "Why don't you change clothes in the bathroom while I get things ready?" Her face paled as I turned away and started to get dishes out of the cabinet. Whatever she was going to say sputtered out into silence. I was still furious over her lie last night. Dinner was a quiet affair, and the kids noticed but didn't say anything. Marge wasn't too hungry, but I made a point of eating a lot. Marge did make several attempts at conversation, which I mostly ignored. Then I realized that I was being stupid and was tipping my hand. My being an a-hole now was just cheap, and I didn't want her to call off the affair before I had evidence. I made a point of shaking my head and said, "Sorry everyone, I've been distracted about a work problem, and I brought my troubles home. Let's start over. How was everyone's day?" We chatted through dinner with the semblance of normality. I made it a point to smile at Marge a couple of times and to be attentive to her. Marge went to bed ahead of me. I pushed the thermostat up about 5 degrees. After waiting an hour, I checked the voice recorders, but again got nothing of interest. I walked into our bedroom. It must have been 77 degrees. I got ready for bed, got in, and rolled away from her without saying anything. She quietly said, "Night, honey." Without rolling over, I said, "Why are you wearing that flannel top? It's certainly not cold in here." She was silent a moment and then said, "Honey, I'm just cold. That's all." I decided to push it. I rolled over to her and embraced her. She hugged me back. She felt really sweaty. "Are you feeling sick?" I asked with concern. She said, "I don't think so. I've just been cold at night lately." I held her close and said, "I know a few ways to warm you up." She stiffened, sighed, and said, "David, I am sorry. I'm just too tired." I rolled away and said, "It's okay." Marge moved to me and spooned me, saying, "I'm just too tired tonight. Tell you what, Wednesday I have an easy day. I'll rock your socks off Wednesday night. I just murmured, it's okay. After some seconds she pulled away and went back to her side of the bed. Things were cold Tuesday morning. I left at the normal time and drove to work. George called to let me know that he installed the GPS on Perez's car last night and gave me the website and login information. I checked out the site. It showed me that Dickhead was across town. Deciding that it was time to check the bedroom voice recorder, I let the office know that I would be back in a couple of hours and drove home. Marge had gotten a call from her best friend, Ashley, Monday morning. Almost immediately, Marge told her that she had had incredible sex this weekend. Ashley squealed, "Did you have sex with Will this weekend?" So, Ashley knows. I wondered if her husband Mike knew and didn't tell me, that pig. No, I wanted to have sex with David this Sunday night, but it did not happen. I wanted to screw him Saturday night like usual, but he spent all day working outside and was too tired, Marge replied. Is David better in bed than Will? Ashley shot back at her. Oh, yes, making love with David is always better, Marge replied. Then why are you screwing Will? She asked with a smile in her voice. It's different, Marge replied. David makes love to me. I feel so safe with him. Will just screws me dirty. It feels good, but I'd never want David to just use me like that. But both are good. I know that doesn't make any sense, does it? It does to me, girlfriend. It's the thrill, the raw passion, spreading your legs to a special friend. Oh, I know, that's why I started doing Brian Sears last year. Then she giggled, plus he has that horse-sized. Marge giggled back. And yeah, that's why you stopped doing him. That horse-sized made you bow-legged. God, I was always so sore after he did me. He is gentle, but it's one thick tool. It's fun to fondle and neat to just look at and say damn. Then Ashley added, hey, next month, Mike will be out of town for 5 days. I think I am going to let Brian drill me on the first day. I'll be sore for the next few days, but should be fine when Mike comes back. Really? Damn. I thought you were done with him. I am, since last year. I thought that Mike was getting suspicious, but Brian and I keep in touch. With Mike away for 5 days, I thought I would indulge myself. You will tell me all about it, Marge ordered. Ashley countered with, only if you tell me all about Wednesday with Will and David, including all the dirty details. Marge said, deal. Then Ashley asked, how's your tit? Marge replied, the mark is fading, but I can't let David see it for another 3 or 4 days. I've been changing in the bathroom and putting flannels on at night. He hasn't noticed. Ashley asked, you'd better be careful. Has he said anything about the lack of sex? No, but I have to take care of that. Then she giggled and said, I was thinking, I never had a chance to do this before, but I was thinking about screwing David Wednesday night. I never had 2 guys in the same day before. Ashley said, I've done that a couple of times. It's a real turn-on. Just make sure you buy a douche before you do David. That juice goes deep. Marge said that she would, and then they said their goodbyes. I don't think so, Marge bitch. And Ashley was a bitch too. Should I tell Mike and risk ruining his life? That was just wrong. Then I remembered thinking that he might be a a-hole for knowing and not telling me. He would want to know, just like me. I would give him a copy of this recording after I took care of Perez. The next call of interest was again Ashley, from earlier this morning. Their conversation had a different tone from Monday's. Marge called and said, hi, Ashley. Ashley picked up on Marge's tone and asked what was wrong. David noticed that I was wearing flannels and changing in the bathroom with the door closed. He asked me about it when he got in bed. I told him that I was cold, but Ashley, the room was hot as hell. I was sweating all night in those heavy flannels. I don't think he believed me, but he didn't say anything else. Then David wanted to have sex, but I couldn't risk him seeing the bruise. Sunday I had pulled the night light out, but David had fixed it, so I told him no again. He was hurt. I tried to make it up by telling him that I would have sex with him this Wednesday, but he didn't seem to care. We lay there with this wall between us. And worse, I just kept thinking about screwing Will, not David. I closed that file and saved it. I didn't need to hear anymore. Digging through the internet, I ordered a semen detection kit and had it shipped to my office. Next, I drove over to the motel. Perez's car was by his room, but it was lunchtime. I went over to the bar. Mary wasn't working, but I saw from the front window that Perez was in a booth. Looking at the menu, I figured that now was good. I walked to his motel door and knocked. I didn't get an answer, so I used the key to open the door. This time I ignored the bed and walked into the other room to see his laptop on and showing a QuickBooks accounting screen. I pulled my thumb drive out, inserted it in his computer, and installed the keylogger program. This time, I didn't bother with screen captures, but checked all emails, all websites, all keystrokes, and all data, which included the accounting data. If he was doing anything that I could use to hurt him, I'd be able to find it. Next, I enabled his remote desktop client and checked that the motel wireless had the right port open. It did. Finally, I went to one of the websites that offered a free light version of remote control software and created the account at his domain name. I installed their software, which would allow me to take control of his laptop from anywhere, and I'd have his desktop on my monitor. The site records IP addresses of everyone who logs in, and so will show that it was installed from the motel network. I removed the icons from the desktop and system tray, as well as from the start menu. Then I brought up his QuickBooks screen and got the hell out of there. I went back to the office and worked a few hours. Getting home in a good mood, I was jovial and helpful to the kids and Marge. She looked worried when I first got home, but relieved after seeing that I was acting normally. Around 10, she said that it was time for her to go to bed. I told her that I had some work to finish and would be up in a while. She answered, "Great. I'll see you in the morning." Yeah, just great, I thought. Get enough sleep so you can service your lover tomorrow. I had a shitload of data to deal with. Today's footage, all the files from the bugs, all the files from Willie's and Marge's computers, and the phone bug data. But it wasn't going to be tonight. I did download the data from her car recorder and put it back in Marge's car. She was either sleeping or pretending to be when I got in bed. I got as far away from her as possible and went asleep thinking, tomorrow's the day. Marge was up ahead of me Wednesday morning, which was fine with me. I was sick to my stomach knowing that she was going to cheat on me again today, and that I would have to watch the recording of her pleasuring her lover and being pleasured. When I went in the kitchen, she was finishing making breakfast. I noticed that she was fully dressed for work, which was another first. She said, "Just in time, sweetie, and good morning." I grunted and reached for the coffee. After I got a cup and had a drink or two, I turned back to her to find her staring at me with a confused look on her face. I said, "Sorry, was still asleep on me feet. Or is that my feet?" She said, "Okay, you're just usually a morning person. Now you know how I feel most mornings." I didn't reply, just sat down and took a sip. The kids came in, and she began serving breakfast. I always help her serving when she cooks, but not today. I didn't look at her but saw out of the corner of my eye that she kept taking quick glances at my face. When she put my plate in front of me, she paused and stared at me. I neglected to notice while looking at the door. As I was about to leave, she stepped in front of me with a worried look and said quietly, "David, is there something wrong?" I stared at her blankly and said, "Not that I know of." I hugged her, suddenly affectionately. She melted into my arms, relieved, and said, "I'm glad." I was worried. I said, "I love you and I can't imagine living without you. And there is no other woman in this world that I want to make love to." I waited and then added, "I hope that you feel the same way about me." She instantly stiffened and made a sobbing noise while holding me tighter, said, "Of course I do." Then she whispered, "And I plan on wearing you out tonight." I pulled away forcefully and walked out without looking back at her. I drove to the motel and downloaded the data while waiting for Marge to go to work. I got back home a little after 9 a.m. I spent the entire time in the parking lot wondering how I was going to get through this day. How could I act normally around the bitch? What I was going to do? How am I going to be able to watch the video of her with another man? Downloading the data from the bugs took some time. I wandered around the house aimlessly while it copied. There was just no way I was going to be able to talk to Marge tonight. Or even worse, get into bed with her. I started with his emails. After a couple hours, I learned some basic facts. He had 3 companies that bought products cheaply and resold them to the local military base, to several Fortune 500 companies, and to the federal government. It appeared that he was screwing 5 women besides my wife, the busy little creep. He had a number of emails concerning the quality of the products and specifications. I saved a couple of emails for further follow-up. Not much so far, but it was a start. Next, I copied his 3 QuickBooks company files and used the keylogger program to find his logins and passwords. I didn't find much useful there either. I'm not a CPA. I did notice, under expenses, that he had 6 company credit cards. He even noted the card number in the notes for each card. Listening to his phone conversations took a long time, but proved to be well worth it. I began to see some correlations between some emails and what he was saying on the phone. One call was from somebody in the base's shipping and receiving department. He said that he had a problem getting the last shipment processed because of the duplicate serial numbers. Worse, all future shipments must have unique serial numbers. Perez was pissed about that and made it painfully clear that he wasn't happy. The guy insisted that the new auditing software would flag all kinds of things and that they had to be more careful. When Perez hung up, he went online and purchased 2 specialty printers and supplies. Another call was from a supplier who wanted Perez to buy from him. After a lot of beating around the bush, Willie Boy finally said, "Look, the qualification process takes forever. That is just the way it is. But I like you and want to help." The chief of procurement for the base is the guy who approves vendors, but he takes the advice of his procurement agent. "I can get him to help you, but it will cost you." The guy sounded defeated when he asked, "How much?" "For $5,000 cash you can sell $100,000 worth of stuff to the base. And to help you out, you can raise your price by 2% without any problem. Future orders won't cost quite as much." The guy sounded a little happier. "Okay, how do I get the money to you?" "Let me know when you have it ready. I'll tell you where to meet me. 2 days later, your bid will be accepted." "Thanks. I'll call as soon as possible." His next call was from a guy in the base procurement section, which was where Marge worked. The guy gave Perez the amounts that several competitors had submitted on several contracts. Other than that, he received 4 calls of interest, all from his bitches. One of the calls was from my wife. It was the same conversation that I had heard from the car recorder. Taking a break, I decided that it was time to get a bit more organized. So I set up Marge and Will folders on the flash drive and subfolders for video, audio, data, and miscellaneous stuff. I moved everything I had into the folders and made a backup. It was time to call George. He commiserated with me for a few minutes, and then I told him that I needed him in his official capacity. He was all ears. When I finished, he said, "Excellent. Although I can't use your evidence in court, it will unofficially make my ongoing investigation easier. We have been looking into shipping and receiving for a couple of months now. Inventory goes missing, sometimes whole shipments. The paperwork just doesn't show anything wrong, but physical inventories show duplicate serial numbers and below-spec materials. I need to see what you have as soon as possible." I said, "I have to be out of the house before she comes in. I can meet you this afternoon at your office." He said, "No, let's meet at my apartment at 3 p.m. I don't want anyone else involved just yet. Dinner and drinks are on me. Also, drowning the pain a bit." "I'm driving. You're getting drunk," George said firmly. I agreed, and we signed off immediately. That was my answer. I would hang out with George tonight and get shit-faced. By the time that I'd get home, Marge would be asleep, and tomorrow morning I could use the hangover as the excuse to stay away from her. My stomach suddenly sickened. It was almost 1 p.m. She would be with him shortly. I called Marge's cell phone and got her voicemail. I guess she didn't want to talk to me right now. I left her a message saying that I was going to see George and would be late. Eventually, I got back to work by starting on the video capture files from Monday to this morning. There I got my first surprise. Early Monday afternoon, a woman let herself in with her own card. The prick immediately got up from his desk, swept her into his arms, and kissed her passionately. They retired to the bed for some horizontal bump and grind. I saved the file. Tuesday morning, he screwed a housekeeper. It was a quickie. Tuesday afternoon, another housekeeper knocked on his door. He let her in, gave her some cash. She knelt down in front of him and gave him a BJ. I copied the scenes for later use. It was about time to meet George, so I did another full backup, making an extra for George to keep. George picked me up, and we spent about 2 hours going over what I had found, and then we headed to the bar. It was about 1 a.m. when we left, but that is about all that I remember. Thursday morning, I awoke at about 9. The house was deserted, Marge and the kids long gone. There was a note on the table. It read, "Since you were so drunk last night, you didn't set your alarm clock. I am not your wake-up service." I chuckled, thinking, she is so pissed. Good. I won't have to work on staying away from her. Next, I called the office to let them know that I was sick. Then I headed to the motel to get the video that I was dreading to see. On the way back, George called, saying that the investigation was now making real progress. The guy with the $5,000 bribe agreed to wear a wire. The methods that Perez and his buddies were using to steal had been tracked, and a preliminary report had been filed to base command. The expectation was that the MPs would conduct a raid on Perez's office, motel room, and house. His computers would be well searched, and there had better not be any keylogger running, sending data to me. I assured him that there would not be. George thought that the raids would happen in about 10 days, and hoped that I could hold off confronting Marge until then. Then he added a real kicker. Since there was a leak to Perez from procurement, Marge was now considered a person of interest. I was about to say, that was pretty stupid. Marge doesn't steal? Then I realized that I used to think that Marge would never cheat, either. We promised to talk tomorrow. I got home and downloaded the motel data as well as the house data. Then I started watching the Wednesday data until 12:30, but then stopped. Next, I checked his email and found what looked to be 2 other vendors who were bribing Perez. Those I forwarded to George. I found a few emails from his bitches. A couple of them gave dates and times when they would be there. I noted those as Perez would be too busy to notice that I was taking over his computer. Finally, it was time. I couldn't put off viewing the video of Marge. I fast-forwarded until he went to the door and my wife walked into the room. I stopped the playback and just sat there feeling like my guts were washing out of me. Hollow, sick, destroyed, miserable, mad. I felt them all, and others that I couldn't put names to readily. Eventually, I started the playback and watched them embrace and kiss passionately. Other than her reminding him to be gentler, they didn't say much as they undressed each other and rolled on the bed to fondle. With tears running down my face, I watched him just play with her body. Worse, I watched her respond to him. She was doing to him all of the things that she did for me. I fast-forwarded until I saw her getting on the bed. She lay on her back, and I watched her open her legs for another man. Thursday evening was quiet. The kids were out. Marge and I did our own things without much communication. After everyone went to bed, I switched out the data recorder in her car and copied it. I couldn't resist checking the car data. I was betting that she talked to Ashley on the way to work. Marge would not have called on the bedroom phone because I was hungover and sleeping in there. And she wouldn't try in the kitchen as the kids might walk in at any moment. Sure enough, Ashley called Marge, asking how it went. Marge said, "It was fine with Will. I made him be gentler and I'm not sore this morning. Just that well-drilled feeling. He is still too rough and he makes me do things I don't really want to do, but I enjoyed our time together." Quietly, Ashley asked, "But with David? Let me guess, either he came in 2 seconds or he couldn't get it up, right?" Marge wailed, "No, he didn't show up. He went out and got drunk with one of his buddies. He staggered and late as hell, stinking of alcohol, and collapsed into bed without saying a word to me. What did you do?" What could I do? I lay there steaming while he snored. This morning, I turned off his alarm clock, wrote a biting note, and left. Ashley noted, "You know, sometimes, once in a while, most of us do go out and tie one on. Sounds like bad timing is all." "No," Marge wailed again. I hinted a couple of times to him about sex last night. Yesterday morning, I told him I planned on wearing him out that night. He didn't say anything, just went to work. He didn't even say goodbye. "Do you think he is suspicious or knows something?" Ashley asked. Marge said, "No, how could he? I only have sex with Will when David is at work. No, I think David is mad that we have only had sex once a week for a while now, and he's trying to get even by scorning me." "That's a reach, girl." "I think I am right," Marge said. "He knew he could screw me last night, the first Wednesday in months, and he turned it down cold." Then she added, "But damn it, I really wanted to do both of them yesterday, even if I got sore again. Damn David's male ego. He is going to find it quite cold in the bedroom for a while now." Ashley laughed a little and said, "Marge, it's female ego that is making you want them both in the same day. Let it go, at least for now." "I guess." "It's more than a guess. You have been holding out on David for months. He might be looking at that as you controlling him, and he might have fought back by denying you." Ashley explained, "He can't be happy, and you'd better fix that problem before you worry about screwing them both." "That's what I was trying to do. Give David more sex?" Marge exclaimed. "No, you made Wednesday night about what you wanted, not about what David needed," Ashley reminded her. "You're right, but what should I do now?" Ashley said, "Let it go. Maybe he didn't mean to scorn you. Just assume that that's the case and let it go. There is a good chance that David will want you tonight." I saved that conversation thinking, hot damn, I pissed her off royally and don't have to pay the piper. There was another call a few minutes later, Ashley again. "Hey Marge." Ashley started out. "You said that Will makes you do things that you don't want to do. Why do you let him? He's forceful and does what he wants. I got him to not drill me quite as roughly, but he is just a rough lover," was the reply. Curious, Ashley asked, "What kinds of things does he make you do?" "One thing yesterday. He put me on my knees on the floor with the back of my head against the bed. Then he stuffed his meat in my mouth and started pumping away, but he was forcing my mouth so hard that it was like I was punching myself in the lips every time he thrust. Since I was against the bed, I couldn't get away from it." "That sucks," Ashley noted. "He also likes to talk dirty and tells me to say, well, dirty things to him. It seems stupid to me, but he seems to get off on it." Ashley said, "Men." "Yeah," Marge agreed. "I think he believes the spicy movies are real life. He wouldn't stop sticking his balls in my mouth until I agreed to kneel there and say in a real sexy tone, 'I love your gonads.' Once I said it, we had good sex." Weird. Thursday evening, Marge made overtures for sex, but I ignored them. It was almost 2 a.m. before I went to bed, and she was asleep. Sorry, Ashley, you were wrong. I was up early Friday and went directly to work. I left around 3, taking the semen test kit with me, and stopped at the motel to get Thursday's and today's videos. Mary wasn't working at the bar, but I had a drink while waiting for the data to download. Getting home, I started copying the files into their storage locations and then used the semen test kit on Marge's panties. The results were positive, though that didn't change anything. I had enough time remaining to review the new videos, and once again I was shocked. I opened the first file, and to this day, I wish that I had not. A young lady in a base military uniform entered his room. Dickhead, and she sat on the sofa and drank a couple of glasses of wine. She looked like she might be 20, or maybe 21, and perhaps weighed 110 pounds. After a while, he made his move. His hands were all over her. They kissed and hugged. He got her blouse and bra off and began playing with her breasts. At first, she was definitely going along with it, but as he stripped her, she became less comfortable. When he went to take her skirt off, she resisted, saying, "No, I'm sorry. This is wrong, and I didn't mean to do this. I'm going to leave now." She tried to get up, but he threw her back on the sofa and said, "Too late now. You little bitch, you're going to get pumped." She rolled off the other end of the sofa and started toward the door. Perez grabbed her, spun her toward him, and with a smirk on his face, punched her hard in the stomach. While she writhed on the floor, he got undressed. I could not watch anymore and closed the file. Then I raced to the bathroom and threw up violently. When I recovered a bit, I made a copy for George. Deciding to continue, I clicked the next file and got another surprise. Mary walked into his room. He gave her money, and she had sex with him. Well, she told us that she was a hooker. Still, it surprised me to see her in action. There were 2 other files of interest, both from this afternoon, just a few hours ago, in fact. The first was a phone call to Marge asking her to stop by because he was so horny. After a bit of playing around, Marge agreed. The last file showed Marge walking in, kissing and hugging Perez, then dropping to her knees to give him a BJ. She left shortly after that. With no particular reason, I saved the 3 files for George as well. I called George and told him that I had to see him immediately. He agreed and suggested that he could come right over to my house. But it was getting too close to the time that Marge could be home, so I asked to meet him at his office. 10 minutes later, he answered his door. I did not enter, but handed him the flash drive and said, "George, there are 4 files on this. The first one is the important one. I couldn't watch it and I am sorry that you have to do so. I'll be waiting in my car when you are done." Almost an hour later, George opened the car door and got in with me. He looked at me and said, "I don't know who she is, but I will find out. And Perez is going to pay." Putting his seatbelt on, he added, "To the bar, James. I don't want booze. I want some answers, some from Mary." Mary was sitting at the bar but not working it. When she spotted us, she waved to the bartender to get us a pair of gin and tonics. After he set them down in front of us, she hugged George and squeezed my hand, and then said, "Hi guys, it's always good to see you too." Blindly, I said, "Hi Mary, it's great to see you." George stared at her and said, "Mary, what is wrong?" Her face crumpled and she said, "George, you were right again. I picked up venereal diseases. That's why I can't work at the bar. I'm infected and don't want to risk infecting anyone else. I'm done being a hooker, and I am done worrying about school. I am just going to make it as I can, without being either a nurse or a hooker." "You're not done with school," beat George's. "You are going to be a nurse," by a half second. Mary just hung her head and replied, "No, I can make it with this job if I don't have to save for school. That's good enough now." George grabbed her by the arm and spat, No, it's not even close to being good enough. You talked about becoming a nurse that day in that jail cell, and you have worked for it every day since. I'm glad you are not going to sell yourself anymore, but I will not let you give up." I added, "We'll find another way, Mary." She looked at us both with tears in her eyes and said, "I couldn't ask for better friends, but I can't and won't ask you guys for help. That would be taking advantage of our friendship." George and I looked at each other before I said, "Good. You're not asking, and since you can't stop us, the subject is closed. We'll get back to you." We all laughed, and then I followed up on it. "George," I asked, "aren't there going to be some openings on the base shortly?" Before he could answer, Mary got serious again. "Guys," she said, "there are 2 other things I have to tell you. First, I know that you are watching Will Perez. I can see the door to his room though the front windows of the bar, and I hope that you bust him soon." Stone-faced, George nodded. "Well, the first thing that I did after learning that I had venereal diseases was to screw him bareback." My mouth dropped and I gasped, "Why?" She snarled at me, because that was the only way that I could hurt him. In a menacing tone, George asked, "Mary, what did he do to you?" "He didn't do anything to me, but he assaulted and beat a woman. No, a girl. I saw her stagger out of his door as I was coming to work. She could barely walk. I went over to her to try to help. She was crying. Her face was bruised and bloody. Her skirt was torn. All she would let me do was help her to her car, and then she left." Mary added, "George, she might have been 20, and she was wearing an Air National Guard uniform. She is one of yours." "I know," George said. "I will find her and make sure she is getting help, and he is going to regret everything he has done." Turning to me, he added, "And I suspect that David has some nasty ideas that he hasn't told me about yet. We can talk about it." It was about midnight when I got to bed. Marge was asleep, and now George knew all my plans. He was also going to see if Mary could fit into base procurement. They were shortly going to have several openings. Saturday was a quiet day. Marge and I did not talk much. We did the usual movie night, but when I arrived with the drinks, Marge was sitting in the center of the sofa with Tom and Julia on either side. Normally Marge and I sit next to each other, and the kids sit next to us on the sofa. I sat in an armchair, noticing that Tom and Julia looked uncomfortable, while Marge looked smug. Marge went to bed early. I used the time to check the voice recorders, but drew a blank. She had one email from Perez thanking her for the relief Friday, and looking forward to next Wednesday. We didn't really talk Sunday. We just went through the motions of normal lives. I went to bed slightly before Marge, and noticed that she was still going into the bathroom to change into her flannels. She had to know that her lies and cheating had us, in a downward spiral. She got into bed without saying anything, but got in roughly enough to be sure that she wakened me. I didn't say anything, as she immediately rolled away from me. I was fine with that. She could keep her diseases. Monday afternoon, George called to tell me that he had found the assault victim. She had gone to a civilian hospital, and after talking, was now willing to testify against Perez. He also informed me that they were planning to conduct the raid next Monday morning. He added that he hoped that I could leave Marge to do her thing this week so as not to risk tipping off Perez. I again agreed, and told him that I was planning on telling Marge that I would be out of town from Wednesday until Sunday, but that I would actually get a room at the motel and would work on the details of what I had told him. Next, I called Kevin at the motel and reserved the room directly over Perez's for 5 days. Monday night at dinner, I told Marge and the kids that I had to go out of town Wednesday and would be back Sunday. Julia and Tom expressed dismay. Marge didn't react. Tuesday, Marge and I basically did not talk. I packed a bag and put it in my car. After everyone went to bed, I checked the voice recorders. Only one conversation was interesting. It was from Marge to Ashley this morning. Marge said, "Ashley, that pig is ruining things." "Will or David?" a confused Ashley asked. "David. We have been fighting, or at least ignoring each other for days now. He told me last night that he is going out of town Wednesday morning and won't be back until Sunday. Again, I won't have the chance to screw them both the same day, damn it." Ashley said, "Marge, you'd better take care of problems with your husband before you worry about your fantasies. This has gone on too long." "Yeah," Marge replied. "But if David would stop being a jerk, I would rock his world. I just don't understand why he has to be so difficult." Great. She is screwing around. But I am being difficult. I saved the file anyway. I went to work early Wednesday, but left around noon to check into the motel. I pulled the video receiver from my car and set it in 2 laptops up in the room. For the next few days, I would have real-time access to the feed as well as the internet. Then I waited until about 1, watching out the window. I saw Marge pull up and walk to his room. She had her laptop with her. Turning on the live feed, I watch her hug and kiss him. She told him that she had to check email first, and then started her laptop and connected to the motel's internet connection. They both worked on their computers for about 10 minutes. As soon as she told him that she was done, he picked her up and carried her to the bed. Dropping her on it, he said, "I need to drill you, baby." She pulled him down to her to kiss him and said, "And I need you to drill me." I turned the sound down and remotely logged in to Perez's computer, and from his, into Marge's laptop while they undressed each other. Then I went to work. They played, rough and hard, for almost 2 hours and then fell asleep in each other's arms. They woke up around 5 p.m., which gave me 4 hours of access to their computers. When they started waking up, I logged out but kept watching. She woke up first, looked around, saw the clock, and then saw him. She shook him, saying, "Will, wake up, honey, we fell asleep." He snorted as he woke up and rolled on his back. He asked, "What time is it?" "A little after 5. I have to get going." He yawned. "Me too." I promised the wife I'd take her out to dinner. She playfully hit him and said, "Hey, I don't want to hear about that. I hear too much about your husband and kids. Don't forget," he said as he started getting up from the bed. She grabbed him and said, "Sweetie, I am sorry that I said that. I know we have other lives, and I love mine. I just get jealous sometimes thinking of you being with your wife. I know, baby, what we are doing is hard for both of us." He added, "I'm glad that you haven't screwed your husband lately. I like thinking about how your body is mine alone." She reacted, "It's not yours. I choose to share it with you, but I love my husband, and I am going to make it up to him for the last few weeks that I have been neglecting him. I do love my time with you. Please understand that. You get me so hot and make me feel amazing, but I can't risk ruining my marriage." He pulled away from her and said, "Hey, I don't want my wife finding out either." As he got up, he said, "Damn, my shoulders are on fire." She gasped and said, "Will, I'm sorry. I scratched you. God, I am sorry." Shit. He went to the bathroom mirror and viewed his battle scars. "Shit, you scratched the shit out of me, bitch. I'm sorry," she cried as she rolled out of bed. She immediately cried again as she arose. I'm sore." She wiped her hand over her crotch and screamed again. "You pig. You promised to be careful. You tore me, and you marked my tits again. Yeah, like I asked you to rip the skin off of my shoulders. How am I going to keep that secret from my wife? Damn it." "I'm sorry," Marge moaned. "I guess we can't keep our passion under control." "I guess," he muttered. "Let's get cleaned up and dressed. I've got to get home." When they were ready, he gave her a peck on the cheek, grabbed her bum, and said, "Lover, I'll see you soon." She kissed him back and then left. Looking out the window, I watched her walk away from her lover to go back to our home. Anyone watching her walk would realize that she had a real sore holes. And from the way that she walked, she was going to be sore for a couple of days. Oh yes, she was going to pay. Thursday and Friday, I alternated between my job and my projects. Thursday afternoon, he got a call from Marge saying that this has been great, but that she could not see him anymore, and that she was ending the affair. They fought for a bit, and then promised to talk again soon. Late Friday evening, I did the final transfers between computers, sent some emails, and then deleted the keyloggers from both Marge's and Perez's laptops, as well as clearing their logs. I accessed Marge's computer through Perez's, knowing that the login program would note that the IP address was from the motel. I forwarded all of her active quotes to Perez. I drove back to the house Sunday afternoon. Nobody was home. I picked up the 4 voice recorders and cleared them without listening to them. George could have them, and the one from her car back now. Then I unpacked and got a drink. Julia and Marge got home shortly, having been to the grocery store. Tom arrived as we were putting things away, and we had a quiet last night. Monday morning, I was at work when around 11 a.m. I got a call from our family doctor's office. The receptionist asked me to come in immediately, if possible, but that it must be today. I asked why, but she just said that the doctor wanted to see me. When I informed her that I would not take off work on short notice without a reason, she offered to have the doctor speak to me. Dr. Benson picked up and said, "David, I do need you to come to the office as soon as possible. I need to run some tests on you." I replied, "Doctor, I will be in, but please tell me what brought this up and why it is so immediate. I'd rather speak in person. I need to know if I should just go check myself into a hospital for immediate surgery, doctor, or just update my will. You are leaving me hanging." He sighed and said, "Okay, David, your wife came in this morning feeling bad. Tests show that she has 3 sexually transmitted diseases. She told us that she has not had sex with anyone but you, so it is likely that you were infected and gave her the diseases. Doctor, I will be right over." When I arrived, the normally friendly staff was not. A sullen nurse led me to an exam room and took a blood sample. It hurt like hell, and I noticed that she was using a really big needle. About an hour later, Dr. Benson walked in with a puzzled look on his face. He started talking as he was still walking in. "David, you do not have any venereal diseases." I apologized for my statement on the phone. I just assumed that Marge was telling me the truth, but she wasn't. "I understand, doctor. I am glad that I am clean." I added, "Marge and I haven't had sex in a while. I now know that she cheated on me. I'm sorry, and here is a copy of your test results." Right then, my cell phone rang. It was my daughter. I said, "Doctor, I'm sorry, but my daughter never calls during the day unless there is an emergency." He nodded as I answered to hear Julia sobbing into the phone. "Honey, what's wrong?" "Daddy, Mom just told us that you have been cheating on her and that now you have given her a disease," she cried. "How could you?" "Julia, I am at the doctor's now. I do not have any venereal disease, I told her gently. Let me put Dr. Benson on to confirm that. After doing so, he handed the phone back to me. Julia sobbed, Daddy, I am so sorry that I doubted you. So very sorry. It's just that Mom was so cold and matter-of-fact about it when she told us that we just believed her. I understand, baby. It's okay, I told her. Now tell your brother the truth, but please do not tell your mother that we talked. I will be home shortly. When I went to the receptionist to pay my copay, she slid some papers over to me, saying, These are copies of your test results showing that you are clean. The hyper-regulations do not allow us to give you any information about your wife's medical issues. Sliding some more paper to me, she added, But I must have made a mistake and accidentally given you copies of her report as well. She looked me in the eye and smiled. I realized that Marge was not going to be well treated in this office when she came over for her VD treatments. I thanked the lady and headed home for the final confrontation. Arriving home, I saw that Marge's parents had been invited to this circus. I parked my car in the garage and entered the kitchen. I could hear voices from the living room, talking and sobbing, but mostly I noticed my father-in-law. Standing about 6 feet 4 inches and 230 pounds, a retired coal miner, he was always difficult to miss. Now, standing there red-faced, glaring at me with hatred in his eyes, his hands clenched into fists, he had my attention. It didn't help when he snarled, You little shit. You cheated on my baby, and you gave her a disease. I am going to wipe this floor with you. Figuring that I had about 2 seconds to avoid a serious butt-kicking, I walked over to him, put my face about 6 inches from his, and, staring into his rage-filled eyes, said, If I did that, you'd be an a-hole not to beat the shit out of me. But I didn't do it. Confusion battled with rage. He stared back, until finally, he asked, Tell me. Make it quick. I handed him a copy of each medical report. He read them 6 times, and then just stared at the pages while the crying in the living room got louder. Finally, he met my gaze and said, You're clean. My baby has a venereal disease, but someone else gave it to her. She lied to me, and she cheated on you. I said, We have been having problems lately and haven't had sex in a while. That saved me from getting her diseases. But you couldn't have known that. David, I am sorry for what I said and for what I thought about you. It's okay. Thanks for listening. My marriage is probably over, maybe my life. But I am glad that you were willing to listen. We headed toward the living room, but suddenly he stopped and asked, Marge told us that she has one STD, chlamydia, but you said diseases. Did you mean more than one? Yeah, she also has syphilis and gonorrhea, I answered. His eyes tightened and he said, Let's go have a talk. I grabbed him by his shirt and shoved him against the countertop. Now it was me hissing at him. On my terms. She is your baby, but she is my wife, and she should not have brought her parents or our children into this. But she did. My baby, Julia, called me in tears. I don't know yet what my son thinks. You are a witness here because your baby dragged you and them into this. But that is it. Staring up at him in a rage, at this guy who could throw me through a wall, I added, I don't care what you hear. This is about my family. You stay the hell out of it. Understand? Quietly, he said, Yes, I understand, David. I released him, and we walked into the living room. Both Marge and her mother screamed at me. Tom was sitting in a chair, crying. Julia dodged her grandfather and plastered herself to me saying, Daddy, I love you. Tom followed a moment later. I found myself in a double hug while my mother-in-law cursed me and my wife cried. Julia touched the papers in my hand, and while staring me in the eyes, asked, Is this the proof? I nodded. Julia took the papers, and with a guilty look, she stepped back to read the medical reports. She pulled on Tom's arm and showed him the important lines. They exchanged looks, and then both hugged me harder than before. Marge's mother cursed again and then said, How can you two hug that cheating pig? He gave your mother a sexual disease. Marge, on the sofa, cried harder. Julia pulled away to walk over to her grandmother. She knelt down in front of her and, staring into her eyes, offered up both medical reports. A few moments later, my mother-in-law buried her face in her hands. Marge screamed, What? What does everyone think is so different? That pig cheated on me and gave me an STD. Julia's face was indescribable as she got up from her grandmother and knelt down in front of her mother. She again showed both medical reports, pointing to the lines that proved that I was clean, but that Marge was not. Marge's face drained of color as she understood the reports. Julia said, Mom, you lied to us. You cheated on your husband. You are a bitch. Marge gasped, and her hand swung at Julia's face in retribution. My daughter has fast reflexes. Her arm flashed up to block the hit. Now it was her turn to hiss. Mother, don't ever try to hit me again. You have lost that right. You are my mother and I love you. Getting up, she added. But you are a lying bitch. You tried to turn my brother and me against our daddy to cover your activities. I will never forgive that, you bitch, she returned to me. And again I was hugged by both of my children. Marge stared at the three of us together and quickly found a defense. Kids, your father must have given me the disease 2 or 3 weeks ago. Accidentally, I am sure. He didn't know his bitch had infected him. He must have had symptoms well before me and gone to some clinic for the cure. We haven't had sex in a while. Though I have asked David to make love to me, he has refused. With puppy dog eyes, Marge looked at everyone but me and added, I have not cheated on my husband. I never would. But he did. And now he has set me up to look like I did it. Please believe me. I have not had sex with anyone but my husband since we met. Well, everyone except Marge and me was looking confused now. I could see that Marge's dad was again thinking about pounding me through the floor. Time to go to the last level, the last chance that Marge could come clean, and perhaps we could save our marriage. Ignoring everyone else, I stared intently at Marge and said, Marge, this is your last chance. I have proof. Please tell the truth, and maybe we can work it out. I had hoped she would respond honestly, but she attacked like a mother bear. You creep, you filthy, cheating pig. You have no proof because I never cheated on you. Ever. You lie to my family. You insult my virtue. Show us your proof, a-hole. Okay, I'll show you, I replied. Marge looked a little less confident as I got my laptop out, connected it to the home entertainment system, and booted it up promptly. As it loaded, I thought, well, the revenge I had been working on for the last weeks had already started for Perez. Now it was about to start for Marge. I hadn't expected 4 innocent people to be part of it, but here they are. The first thing I did last Wednesday, while Marge was occupying Perez, was to use one of his company credit cards to register a domain name and to start a web hosting account. Then I spent the next couple of days creating the website that we were about to view. Staring at Marge, I asked, You broke up with him Thursday, didn't you? Scorning me, she laughed. You are crazy. There is no one other than you. But there might be from now on. Oh, after today you really would need someone else, I said. I brought up Outlook on our 65-inch TV and clicking on one message, I asked, Do you recognize this guy? His name is Will Perez. Marge's face paled and she whispered a weak, No. He sent me a link to his website. You're featured prominently. That was one of the last messages that I had sent while I was last logged into his machine. Turning to Julia and Tom, I said, It's time for you guys to go upstairs. Julia said, No. She brought us into this mess. We are not leaving now. Tom simply noted, Dad, I see the address of the link. If you send us upstairs, we will be typing that address on my computer 5 seconds later. Nobody else seemed to have an opinion, and Tom was likely to be the only person who would read a link as a matter of course. He must be wondering why I was about to bring up a website called The Bitches of W. Perez. Nodding to my children, I clicked the link. The website flashed a blue screen and a deep male voice reverberated. Welcome to the Bitches of Will Perez. Pictures of fully dressed women began filling the screen. While the voice continued, I want to share with the world the bitches that I screw. These are mostly married women who are easy to talk into bed. I use hidden cameras to record everything that they do. Marge gasped loudly, maybe feeling that her world was now about to crash around her. The voice now sounded like Perez. I spent a lot of time converting the audio to his voice print. Check out the bitches. I have some video and sound bites for each. If you like what you see, email me. I have high-resolution recordings of these bitches screwing me. For a small fee, they can be yours. And remember, these are hidden videos. These married women don't have a clue that I am showing them to the world. Everyone's eyes were riveted on the 4th image over. It was Marge. She was dressed in one of her usual work outfits, a gray pantsuit that looked really good on her. I hovered the mouse over her image and we heard, Meet Marge A. She's a 50-something MILF. She is actually 44 years old. Tough shit. A bit overweight and with a loose tunnel. She's been ridden hard and put away sour, but she is a natural bitch who loves sex. She was the quickest I ever met to spread her legs for me. I have a lot of videos of Marge. Click this to hear and see samples of Marge in action. Email me for a list of videos and prices. Everyone's head swiveled to stare at Marge, who was white-faced and white-knuckled. Staring at the screen, she moaned, No, no, this can't be happening, no. Clicking on Marge's picture brought up a screen with 8 clips of Marge samples. Marge's eyes grew large as she took in the screen. Obviously, she recognized the location and maybe some of her positions. She began sobbing. Her mother put her arm around her. Her father looked dazed. Our kids looked, well, mad as hell. I stepped away from the computer saying, I think we have seen enough. No, Julia said. I have not. These little pictures could be any kind of bullshit. I want to know what the hell is going on. She snarled, I want proof either way. While saying that, she darted past me to grab the mouse and clicked on the first image. As the video clip loaded, Tom went over to her and put his arm on her shoulder. She hugged him back tightly. The scene showed a naked Marge kneeling against the side of a bed with somebody's balls in her mouth. Her head moved around his bag, as her tongue must have been doing. Then she looked up at him and the camera, and with a sexy smile said, I love gobbling your gonads. Oh, gross. That's disgusting, a shocked Julia exclaimed. How could you do that? Tom looked even more shocked but said nothing. Marge's father hugged his wife while Marge just sobbed. After a few seconds, Julia clicked on the next link, and the video appeared. It showed Marge naked again. I heard Marge's mother gasp. Finally, she looked up at him, and using her sexy voice, said, You taste great, lover. Marge's sobs grew louder. Nobody said a word as Julia clicked on the third link. It was another of her lewd acts. As the video faded, I said, Julia, we have seen enough. She nodded with tears streaming down her face. She and her brother walked across the room to hug me again. Tom was crying, as were Marge's parents. Marge was crying uncontrollably into her mother's arms. After a minute, I asked, Marge, why? She bawled harder as she tried to answer, but all I could make out was, don't know. So sorry, God. Handing my car keys to Tom, I said, Kids, go somewhere for a couple of hours. Do some shopping if you want. You have your credit cards. But do you need cash? Tom replied, No, I have that covered. We'll get dinner out and be back this evening. Julia said, I need to get my purse. I'll be right back. After they left, I said, I'll be back in 30 minutes. Marge, it would be good if we could talk then. Looking at her parents, I added, Best if you two would stay, too, please. She needs your help. Then I headed out for a long walk. I got back about 40 minutes later. Marge and her parents were sitting at the kitchen table. Marge immediately got up and said, David, thank you for coming back. I nodded and said, Sit please. We have one more problem to discuss. Marge's face paled again. I noticed as she sat down how red her eyes were. I sat down across from her at the four-person round table and said, Marge, Perez was arrested today. Her eyes grew wide again. George has been investigating improprieties at your office for a couple of months. It turns out that Perez has been defrauding the government and blackmailing his suppliers for kickback. 3 people just stared at me. It also turns out that he has been screwing a lot of women besides you. I sneered at her. He even bought honest hookers, the kind that you just give money for sex. And he had hidden cameras in his love nest to record everything. Gesturing to the TV, I said, From this website, you can see what he has been doing with those videos. Marge was now crying hysterically. I continued, His office, his business, and his love nest were raided today. Also, 1 guy in your shipping department and 1 in procurement were arrested. Rising and walking to Marge, I added, George has evidence. Emails from you to Perez where you leaked contract details and competitor prices to him. Marge's head snapped up and she gasped, No, I would never do that. Her mother snipped, And how can we believe that? Marge sobbed, Dear mother-in-law, I guess you still have not learned that your bitch of a daughter is capable of a lot of things that are not supposed to be done. I shot back at her. The only reason that you are not in jail right now is because you are, at least at present, my wife. George is bending the rules, but if you are not in his office first thing tomorrow morning, the MPs will escort you there. Standing in front of her, I said, Marge, if you did that, you are going to federal prison for a long time. She cried, I didn't. I know that you have no reason to believe me, but I didn't leak any work stuff to him. She stared at me eye to eye and confessed, Yes, I lied to you. Yes, I had an affair with him and he gave me diseases, and even worse, I tried to set you up to cover for what I did. I thought that we had sex after I was infected, so that you would be, too. I didn't mean for this to happen. I can't expect you to forgive me or want to be with me anymore. I have destroyed my family and my life. And if I had sent Will any information, jail would be a good place for me. I have nothing left regardless, but that I did not do. I asked, Marge, did you ever take your laptop to his love nest? She nodded. A couple of times. It let me get some work done, while still having the afternoons off. I am so sorry, I shouted. The afternoons off work so you could screw around? Wincing, she nodded. Marge, did he ever have access to your laptop? Did you ever finish screwing him and then take a shower or fall asleep while you were connected to the base's network? She again nodded without looking up at me. I grabbed her laptop and booted it up quickly. Then I went over and turned off our internet access. I had to do that, as one of the last things I had done while remoting into Marge's computer was to schedule a mass email, making it look like Perez did it. With our internet access turned off, the emails could not be sent, but here was another crime to lie on Perez. I pretended to be surprised at needing a password and had her tell me what it was. After a bit, I looked up and said, Marge, he put a remote control program on your computer so that he could take over and see everything. There is a login for Perez. Her head flashed up, shocked again. He set me up, she wailed. Nodding, I said, yep, it looks like he wanted more from you than just sex. Seeing her flinch, I added, besides your mouth and other holes, of course. Pretending to ignore her reaction to that, I bent back to her laptop. I waited a bit and then straightened to look at Marge. It's a good thing that I shut off the internet. There is a scheduled task to send his email link to every contact that you have, I told her. Family, friends, coworkers, church, everyone. You broke up with him Thursday, and this is his way of getting even. Marge just collapsed onto herself, and her mother hugged her again. But this might be enough to keep you out of prison. All three stared at me, so I added, this shows that he had remote control of your computer and could use it to get sensitive data from it. Right now, George thinks that you emailed Perez those documents. This shows that Perez could have done it, and that website logs IP addresses. If you are not lying, Marge, it will show Perez logging into your computer at the times that your emails to him went out. It may clear you. The other part of my revenge was that I had installed the camera software on Perez's computer and copied all of the video files to his hard drive. It now looked like he was guilty of taping his sex scenes. The assault video was included, and since it now looked like these were his videos, they were admissible in court. Perez was in more trouble than he yet knew. I also sent the audio files of his blackmail efforts to his computer. George would be able to use those as well. Finally, from Perez's computer, I had logged into Marge's and emailed him her active quotes. The login website would show that it went from Perez's motel IP address to Marge's computer. Fast forwarding a few months, after Perez's final criminal sentencing hearing, he had been convicted of assault and filming hidden videos. Once released from prison, he would have to register as a sex offender. He was also convicted of theft, fraud, extortion, and racketeering. Marge had to testify about her affair in 4 open court trials, all of which made the newspapers and evening news reports. He never wavered in proclaiming his innocence about the website and the hidden cameras. But since the programs and the files were on his computer, and the young lady testified about her assault, the court took affront and acted more harshly. He was sentenced to a total of 23 years in prison and had to serve 11 years before any chance of parole. The day that he entered prison, both the IRS and the state tax people served notice on Perez that they were seeking back taxes on the bribes that he received, as well as auditing his companies. On his second day in prison, his wife had him served with divorce papers. A week later, George and I were sitting in the bar where Mary no longer worked. Her new job in base procurement allowed her to quit the bar and enter nursing school in their latest night class. I reminded George to tell me what I owed him for his recording devices that I had donated to Perez. He promised that he would and then, grinning widely, added, also, you and I spent $1,500 apiece yesterday. Good for us, I replied. This gin and tonic is not as good as Mary made, but it's not bad either. Ignoring me, George continued, it just happens that I know the supervisor of the guards over where Perez is staying, and I happened to see the guy over at his favorite bar the other day. He mentioned Perez, and then said that he followed the trials and thought that I did a great job bringing a real scumbag to justice. I told him that I wasn't done with Perez yet, and that I wanted him to suffer every day in prison. Then I slid a newspaper over to him. Underneath was an envelope with $3 grand of our money. By now, the white gang has been told that Perez consorted with a black woman. The black gang knows that he abused a black woman. The military guys have learned that he brutally assaulted one of our own. The guard's job is to make sure that Perez stays alive and suffers for his full sentence, and then, I don't care. I stared at George for a long time, and then finally said, thanks. About then, Mike walked into the bar. He looked like shit as he walked over to us. I ordered a new round of drinks. The new barmaid was making better gin and tonics. I had expected Mike to show up tonight. I had told him where I would be. It was this afternoon that, with regret, I had handed him a copy of the file where our wives spoke of their infidelities and told him of what had transpired between Marge and me. Mike sipped his gin and then turned and said, George, I would like to rent some surveillance equipment from you. And so, it began again. 2 weeks later, Perez had a civil hearing concerning his tax evasion charges. I didn't know about it, but now it is obvious that Marge was following his trials. She was in the courtroom that day. As I reached down to pick up a handful of dirt, I remembered watching the courtroom tape and seeing Marge suddenly standing to face Perez, wearing that same gray pantsuit. She brought my Smith & Wesson .357 Magnum up and put 3 bullets neatly in Perez's chest. The 2 bailiffs responded with a hail of gunfire. Once the sound of gunfire stopped, there was silence. Slowly, I let the dirt fall onto the coffin of the love of my life. I realized that, yes, I had my payback, and that I would have to live with that knowledge for the rest of my miserable life. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.